The marble halls of the Capitol building seemed to stretch endlessly before 18-year-old Zephyra Amara as she walked toward the committee room. Her heels clicked against the polished floor, each step echoing the rapid beating of her heart. The weight of the moment pressed down on her shoulders, not just the significance of testifying before Congress, but the memory of 3 simple words that had nearly destroyed her dreams. "You'll never be a scientist." Today, she would prove those words wrong. As she approached the imposing wooden doors, Zephyra's mind drifted back to that fateful day in Mr. Caldwell's chemistry class. The girl who had been told she wasn't smart enough was now about to address the most powerful lawmakers in the country about her groundbreaking scientific discovery. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the doors to face her destiny. 3 years earlier, 15-year-old Zephyra sat in the back corner of Roosevelt High School's chemistry laboratory, her notebook filled with detailed sketches of molecular structures and water filtration systems. While her classmates struggled with basic equations, Zephyra was designing solutions to the water crisis affecting communities like her own. Roosevelt High wasn't like the wealthy suburban schools. The building was old, with peeling paint and outdated equipment, but for Zephyra it was still a sanctuary where her mind could explore infinite possibilities. Her passion for environmental science had started during weekend visits to her grandmother Keturah's house in the rural outskirts of town. Keturah lived in a community where clean water wasn't guaranteed, where families had to boil their water or buy expensive bottled alternatives. Zephyra had watched her grandmother struggle with this basic necessity and promised herself that one day she would find a solution. "Science isn't about fancy equipment," Keturah would tell her granddaughter during evening conversations on the porch. "It's about seeing problems and having the courage to solve them. You have that gift, baby girl. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." At school, Zephyra was known as the quiet genius who absorbed everything. She rarely spoke up during discussions, not because she lacked knowledge, but because her enthusiasm for science was often met with skepticism from teachers and peers. She had grown accustomed to being overlooked, to having her ideas dismissed before they were fully heard. The annual science fair was approaching, and Zephyra had been working on her project for months. She had developed a prototype for a low-cost water purification system that could be built using materials available in underdeveloped communities. The design was revolutionary, combining traditional filtration with innovative chemical processes that could remove contaminants more effectively than existing systems. Her chemistry teacher, Mr. Caldwell, was a man in his 50s who had been teaching at Roosevelt High for over 20 years. He had a reputation for being strict but fair, though Zephyra had always sensed something different in his interactions with her. His praise came reluctantly, and his criticism was often harsh and public. The day that changed everything started like any other. Zephyra arrived early to work on her science fair project in the lab. She had spent the entire weekend refining her water purification system and was excited to show Mr. Caldwell her progress. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, approaching his desk with her notebook and a small working model, "I've made improvements to my project. Would you like to see how it works?" He looked up with barely concealed annoyance. "Zephyra, I've told you before that you need to focus on more realistic projects. This water purification idea is too ambitious for someone at your level." "But it works," she insisted, setting up her demonstration. "I can show you how it removes bacteria and chemical contaminants while maintaining essential minerals. The cost per unit would be less than $50. Making it accessible to communities that—" "Enough," he interrupted, standing abruptly. "You're wasting my time with these fantasies. Do you know how many students have come to me over the years with grand ideas that lead nowhere? Science isn't about dreaming big. It's about understanding your limitations." Zephyra felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment as other students gathered around, drawn by the tension in Mr. Caldwell's voice. She had hoped for encouragement, maybe recognition of her hard work. Instead, she found herself the center of unwanted attention. "Mr. Caldwell, I know the project is complex, but I've done the research. I've tested the prototypes. The science is sound," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He walked around his desk, towering over her small frame. "Zephyra, I'm going to say this once and I want you to really listen. You need to be realistic about your future. Science is a demanding field that requires certain qualities. You're a bright girl, but you need to understand your place. You'll never be a scientist." The words hit her like a physical blow. The room fell silent except for the hum of the ancient air conditioning unit. Zephyra stood frozen, her notebook still open to pages of detailed calculations that suddenly seemed worthless. She looked around at her classmates, some who looked away in discomfort, others who seemed to nod in agreement. "People like you," Mr. Caldwell continued, his voice taking on a patronizing tone, "should focus on more practical career paths. There are plenty of opportunities in service industries or maybe teaching, but this science fantasy needs to stop." The phrase "people like you" echoed in Zephyra's mind. She knew exactly what he meant. In that moment she realized that her skin color, her economic background, and her gender had been silently working against her all along. The dismissive looks, the reluctant praise, the constant questioning of her abilities. It all made sense now. Tears welled up in her eyes as she gathered her materials. Her hands shook as she closed her notebook, 3 years of research and dreams suddenly feeling like foolish mistakes. She ran from the classroom, finding refuge in the empty girls' bathroom, where she finally allowed herself to cry. For the first time in her life, Zephyr began to doubt herself. Maybe she was being unrealistic. Maybe science was a field where people like her didn't belong. That night she called her grandmother in tears, recounting Mr. Caldwell's cruel words and the crushing realization that her dreams might be nothing more than unrealistic fantasies. "Baby girl, what's wrong?" Keturah's voice was immediately concerned as she heard her granddaughter's sobs through the phone. Through broken words, Zephyra told her grandmother everything. "He said I'll never be a scientist, Grandma. Maybe he's right. Maybe I've been fooling myself all along." There was a long pause. When Keturah finally spoke, her voice was firm but gentle. "Zephyra Amara, you listen to me very carefully. I've lived 73 years on this earth, and I've learned that the people who try to limit your dreams are usually the ones who gave up on their own. But what if he's right? What if I'm not smart enough?" "Stop right there," Keturah interrupted. "Do you remember when you were 8 and you figured out why my tomatoes weren't growing? You spent hours researching soil pH and nutrient deficiencies. You created a plan to fix my garden, and it worked. Was that not science?" Keturah's voice grew stronger. "I want you to come over this weekend. There's someone I want you to meet. Her name is Dr. Amelia Reeves, and she's a chemical engineer who's been working on water purification systems for developing countries. She's also a black woman who was told the same things you were told today." That weekend, Zephyra met Dr. Amelia Reeves at Keturah's house. Dr. Reeves was an elegant woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and infectious enthusiasm for her work. She had brought a portfolio of projects she had worked on around the world, spreading them out on Keturah's dining table. "Your grandmother told me about your water purification project," Dr. Reeves said. "I'd love to hear about it." Hesitantly, Zephyra retrieved her notebook from her backpack. As she began to explain her design, Dr. Reeves leaned forward with genuine interest, asking detailed questions and offering suggestions. "This is remarkable work," Dr. Reeves said after Zephyra finished. "You're addressing real problems with innovative solutions. The cost analysis alone shows sophisticated thinking." "But my teacher said—" "Your teacher is wrong," Dr. Reeves interrupted gently. "I've worked with graduate students who weren't thinking at this level. You have the mind of a scientist, Zephyra. More importantly, you have the heart of one." Dr. Reeves told her own story, how she had been discouraged by teachers, how she had been the only black woman in most of her classes, how she had almost given up multiple times. But she had persevered, and now she was leading groundbreaking research that was changing lives worldwide. "I want to tell you something that someone told me when I was your age," Dr. Reeves said, looking directly into Zephyra's eyes. "Your dreams are not too big. The world's expectations are too small. Don't shrink yourself to fit into someone else's narrow vision of what you can become. That day marked a turning point in Zephyra's life. Dr. Reeves became her mentor, guiding her through the complexities of scientific research and helping her rebuild her confidence. She introduced Zephyra to resources, connected her with other scientists, and helped her develop the thick skin necessary to pursue her dreams. The transformation took months of careful rebuilding, of learning to trust her instincts again. Gradually, Zephyra began to reclaim her identity as a scientist. She threw herself into her work with renewed vigor, spending every free moment researching, experimenting, and refining her ideas. Her bedroom became a makeshift laboratory, filled with beakers, pH strips, and various filtration materials. Working with Dr. Reeves, Zephyra refined her water purification system to be more efficient and cost-secure. She learned about patent applications, scientific publishing, and the complex process of bringing innovations to market. Most importantly, she learned that being a scientist wasn't just about understanding formulas. It was about using knowledge to solve real problems. During her junior year, Zephyra's project caught the attention of a journalist writing about young innovators in underrepresented communities. The article, titled "The Teenager Who Could Solve the Water Crisis," brought national attention to her work. Suddenly, she was invited to speak at conferences, consult with environmental organizations, and collaborate with established scientists. As her senior year approached, Zephyra had been accepted to several top-tier universities with full scholarships. Several companies had expressed interest in licensing her water purification technology, and she was fielding calls from investors and environmental groups. The girl who had once been told she would never be a scientist was now 18 years old and already making contributions to her field that seasoned researchers envied. Her water purification system had been tested in several pilot programs with remarkable results. Communities that had struggled with clean water access were now able to produce safe, drinkable water at a fraction of traditional costs. But the moment that would define her young career was still to come. The call came on a Tuesday morning in late spring. Zephyra was finishing her advanced placement chemistry exam when her phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Reeves. "Call me as soon as you can. Something incredible has happened." After the exam, Zephyra rushed to return the call. Dr. Reeves's voice was barely contained excitement. "Zephyra, you need to sit down. The House Subcommittee on Energy and Environment wants you to testify about your water purification technology. They're crafting legislation to fund clean water initiatives in underserved communities, and they want to hear from you." "Testify? Like, in front of Congress?" Zephyra's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, baby girl. They want to hear from the brilliant young scientist who's been making waves in the environmental community. This is huge, Zephyra. This is your chance to influence policy on a national level." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Just 3 years after being told she would never be a scientist, Zephyra was being asked to share her expertise with the highest levels of government. The weeks leading up to the testimony were a whirlwind of preparation. Zephyra worked with Dr. Reeves and advisors to craft her statement, prepare for questions, and build her confidence. She practiced her presentation dozens of times, refining her message. "Remember," Dr. Reeves told her during one of their final preparation sessions, "you're not just speaking for yourself. You're speaking for every young person who's been told they're not good enough, every community that's been overlooked, every dreamer who's been dismissed." The night before the testimony, Zephyra couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Mr. Caldwell's words, about all the times she had been made to feel small and insignificant. But she also thought about her grandmother's encouragement, Dr. Reeves' mentorship, and the communities that could benefit from her work. As she lay in her hotel bed in Washington, D.C., Zephyra made a decision. This testimony wouldn't just be about her research or technology. It would be about the power of believing in yourself, about supporting young people's dreams, and about the incredible things that can happen when we refuse to accept limitations placed on us by others. The morning of the testimony arrived, with a mixture of nerves and determination. In the committee room, Zephyra took her seat at the witness table, facing a panel of senators and representatives. The room was packed with media, lobbyists, and advocates. In the gallery she spotted Dr. Reeves, her mother, and her grandmother Keturah, all beaming with pride. The committee will now hear testimony from Ms. Zephyra Amara, environmental scientist and inventor, the committee chair announced. Ms. Amara, you have 5 minutes for your opening statement. Zephyra stood, her hands steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. She looked out at the faces in the room, some curious, some skeptical, some encouraging. Thank you, Chairman Peterson and members of the committee, she began, her voice clear and strong. My name is Zephyra Amara, and I am 18 years old. 3 years ago I was told by my chemistry teacher that I would never be a scientist. Today, I stand before you as the inventor of a revolutionary water purification system that could provide clean water to millions of people worldwide. A murmur went through the room. Zephyra paused, letting the significance of her words sink in. I'm not here today to talk about my personal journey, though it has been challenging. I'm here to talk about the 2.2 billion people worldwide who lack access to safe drinking water. I'm here to talk about the communities in my own country where clean water is still not guaranteed. She moved to her visual aids, explaining her technology with the same passion she had shown in her grandmother's kitchen years earlier. But now, her audience was the entire nation watching on C-SPAN, young people in classrooms across the country, and policymakers who could turn her innovation into widespread reality. My water purification system can be built for less than $50 per unit, using materials available in most communities. It removes 99.7% of bacteria, viruses, and chemical contaminants while maintaining essential minerals. In pilot programs, it has provided clean water to over 10,000 people in 6 different countries. She clicked to her next slide, showing photographs of communities using her system. This is Maria Santos in Guatemala, who no longer has to walk 3 miles to fetch water for her family. This is the Riverside Community Center in Alabama, where my system provides clean water to over 300 families affected by industrial contamination. The room was completely silent now, all attention focused on the young woman speaking with authority far beyond her years. But I want to address something else today. Zephyra continued, her voice growing stronger. I want to talk about the barriers that prevent young people, especially young women, especially young people of color, from pursuing careers in science and technology. When I was 15, I was told that I should be realistic about my future, that science wasn't for people like me. She paused, looking directly at the cameras. Today, I want to speak to every young person who has been told they're not smart enough, not the right fit, not what a scientist looks like. I want to tell you that your dreams are not too big. The world's expectations are too small. The emotion in her voice was unmistakable now. If we want to solve the world's biggest problems, climate change, disease, poverty, inequality, we need the brightest minds working on them. We can't afford to waste talent because of prejudice or low expectations. She moved to her final slide, showing water access improvements in communities using her technology. The legislation you're considering today isn't just about funding clean water initiatives. It's about investing in innovation, in young people, in the idea that solutions can come from anywhere and anyone. It's about recognizing that the next breakthrough might come from a teenager in an underfunded school, from a young woman who's been told she doesn't belong, from someone who looks like me. As she concluded her statement, the room erupted in applause. Several committee members were visibly moved, and in the gallery, her supporters were wiping away tears. Zephyra had delivered a masterclass in the power of perseverance and the importance of believing in young people's potential. The questions that followed were challenging but respectful. Senators asked about scalability, cost-effectiveness, and implementation strategies. Zephyra answered each question with the depth and expertise of someone who had lived and breathed this problem for years. When one senator asked about her future plans, Zephyra's answer was immediate. I plan to continue my research while pursuing my doctorate in environmental engineering. But more than that, I plan to mentor other young scientists, especially those from underrepresented communities. I want to make sure that no young person ever has to hear that they're not good enough to pursue their dreams." The testimony lasted 3 hours. When it was over, Zephyra was surrounded by reporters, advocates, and congressional staff. The story spread across social media within hours. But the most meaningful moment came that evening, as she was leaving the Capitol building. Standing by the entrance was Mr. Caldwell, looking older and more tired than she remembered. "Michael," she said, "I didn't think I was letting the family." "Zephyra," he called out, his voice uncertain. I saw your testimony today." She stopped, her heart racing. The man who had almost destroyed her dreams was standing before her. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her, raised a low. "I owe you an apology," he said, looking down at his hands. "What I said to you, it was wrong. It was cruel. Watching you today, seeing what you've accomplished, I realize that I let my own limitations cloud my judgment. I'm sorry." Zephyra studied his face, seeing genuine remorse. She thought about responding with anger, about all the ways his words had hurt her, but instead she found herself thinking about all the other students who might be sitting in his classroom right now. "Mr. Caldwell," she said finally, "I appreciate your apology, but I hope you understand that your words have power. There might be another student like me in your class right now, someone who needs encouragement instead of discouragement." He nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "You're right. I've been teaching for 25 years and I've probably said similar things to other students. I don't know how to make that right." "You can start by doing better," Zephyra said gently. "You can start by seeing the potential in every student who walks into your classroom. You can start by believing in them, even when they don't believe in themselves." As she walked away, Zephyra felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had spent 3 years proving Mr. Caldwell wrong, but in that moment she realized that her success was never really about him. It was about proving to herself that limitations are often just lack of imagination, that barriers can be broken, and that the most powerful thing you can do is believe in your own potential. 6 months later, Zephyra returned to Roosevelt High as a guest speaker. The chemistry lab was packed with young faces, reflecting the same curiosity and passion she had once felt. "3 years ago I stood in this very room," she told them, "and I was told that I would never be a scientist. Today I'm here to tell you that the only person who gets to decide what you can become is you." She looked out at the diverse group of students from various backgrounds. "I want you to know that science needs you, not despite your differences, but because of them. The challenges we face, climate change, disease, inequality, they're too big for any one type of mind to solve. We need different perspectives, different experiences, different ways of thinking." She showed them the latest numbers from her project. "Since my testimony, Congress has allocated $500 million, 0 cents, for clean water initiatives. My technology is being implemented in over 200 locations worldwide. But more importantly, 15 other young inventors have come forward with their own innovations, inspired to share their work." As she concluded her talk, the students erupted in applause. But Zephyra noticed one girl in the back who wasn't clapping. She was crying, her notebook clutched to her chest. After the presentation, Zephyra approached her. "Are you okay?" Zephyra asked gently. The girl looked up, wiping her eyes. "I'm Kaya. I'm working on a renewable energy project, but my teacher says it's too complicated. He says I should focus on something more realistic." Zephyra's heart ached with recognition. For the next hour she sat with Kaya, reviewing her renewable energy research. The girl's work was sophisticated and innovative, showing the same systems thinking that had characterized Zephyra's own early research. "I want you to have my contact information," Zephyra said, writing down her email address. "Promise me that you won't let anyone else's limitations become your own." Kaya nodded, clutching the paper like a lifeline. "I promise." As Zephyra left Roosevelt High that day, she reflected on the full circle her journey had taken. The girl who had been told she would never be a scientist had become a catalyst for change, inspiring a new generation of young innovators. Her water purification technology was now being manufactured by a company she had co-founded, with profits reinvested into STEM education programs. She had established the Amara Foundation, providing scholarships and mentorship for young scientists from marginalized backgrounds. 3 months later, she received an email from Kaya with photos of her renewable energy project, which had won first place at the state science fair and earned her a full scholarship to study engineering. "You were right," Kaya wrote. "The only person who gets to decide what I can become is me. I'm going to be an engineer, and I'm going to change the world. Thank you for showing me that it's possible." Zephyr smiled, remembering her own 15-year-old self, devastated after being told she would never be a scientist. That girl could never have imagined that her pain would become her purpose, that her struggle would become her strength, that her dream would inspire countless others. As she prepared for her doctoral studies at MIT, Zephyra carried with her the knowledge that her story was bigger than her own success. She was proof that talent and determination could overcome prejudice and low expectations. The water crisis she had set out to solve was still a global problem, but her technology had already provided clean water to over 50,000 people across 3 continents. More importantly, her story had inspired hundreds of other young scientists to pursue their own innovations, creating a ripple effect of positive change that would continue long after her own work was complete.